Greetings and salutations, everyone. Welcome to the Mel Blackwell Experience on this beautiful day, May 29th, year of our Lord, 2025. Hope you all had a wonderful Memorial Day weekend. Want to kick off our program today. It's going to be a great program, very inspirational program. Got a lot of good business, best practice, and then we'll roll into a few current events. But want to start today with Neal Ford. Wonderful guy, does some great snippets. Willis Potts introduced me to him a couple years ago, and I follow him on YouTube, and I think you'll enjoy this.
People think we're more divided as a country now than we've been in a long time. I know it can seem that way, but when I was a little kid in 1969, the Vietnam War was tearing the country apart. And they'd shot John F. Kennedy, and they'd shot Bobby Kennedy, they'd shot Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. And there was the Manson family and the Zodiac killer, and it just felt like the whole country had lost its mind. My father, who'd grown up in the Depression, well, his faith in humanity was just at a low ebb. And the two of us that June were driving from L.A. to Oakland in an old 1960 Oldsmobile, and the water pump blew out south of Bakersfield. And so this was long before cell phones, so we were going to have to hoof it like 9 or 10 miles into town when this young cowboy pulls up in a flatbed and offers to tow us in. And all my dad had on him for money was this old Chevron gas card, so he kept telling this young fellow, I can't pay you. And the young cowboy's looking at him like, yeah, I wasn't going to charge you. So he rolls us into town, and this is a Sunday, so nothing's open. So he has to go get his mechanic friend to open up his garage, and my dad says, hey, listen, I don't have any money. And the mechanic says, we'll work something out. And then they all realize they don't have the actual parts, so now they got to go roust out the local auto parts store owner, and they bring him down. And my father's like, okay, we need to talk about how this is all going to get settled, because he just couldn't imagine anybody being this trusting about the money. So the cowboy says, look, if it make you feel better, I got a bunch of watermelons I need to get loaded onto my flatbed, and it's pretty hot work, and if you help me out, I'll pay for the part. So next thing you know, we're all unloading watermelons from inside a rail car. That's about 140 degrees. And 90 minutes later, we are soaked in sweat. And up rolls the car, just running like a top. And my dad says, I really don't know how to thank you, fellas, and for this good turn. And we're turning to go, and the mechanic gets this look on his face and says, whoa, where do you think you're going? And you could see on my father's face just all the fear and distrust come to the surface. And he stiffened like a leopard. And the mechanic says, no. My wife's going to make us all Sunday dinner, and you and the boy can get a shower and a clean shirt, and it'll make the drive easier for all of us. So we sat down for a dinner of fried chicken from the chicken right over there, and corn on the cob from the corn right over there. Man, I got to tell you, we'll never have a meal that good ever again. And my dad didn't say maybe 3 words the whole drive, but when we got home, I got into bed, and I was just about to turn off the light, and he stops in the doorway, and he says to me, no matter what you see in the movies or on TV or you read in the papers, you listen to me. That's how people really are. And about a month later, Neil Armstrong walked on the moon. So, keep the faith.
It's good, isn't it? You got to remember that. I remember almost everybody that I've looked up to in life, I would say they were optimistic. And not everybody was inspirational, but the role models for me, they're optimistic. They're can-do people. And, I think that rubbed off on me. But what an important thing to remember, that deep down, most people are good people. And I'm going to contradict that a little bit today, because we're going to talk about some interesting things about human nature. We're also going to tie that into business and, how that applies to running a business, and my experiences in being around a lot of different businesses, a lot of different leaders, leadership styles, different industries, et cetera. And it's fascinating. But first thing I want to get into is a little bit of the good people versus bad people thing. It's really hard to get your head around, right? And you definitely know that you do believe in evil when you start thinking about how you worry about your children, right? So it's, in some instances, it's like, look, I think most people are good. It's really hard to believe that people would do these bad things. But right before your kid was to go off to, say, New Orleans to, spend a weekend with a fraternity or sorority or, some sort of an event, what are you telling them? Hey, look, there's some bad folks out there, have your head on a swivel, these kind of things. Well, don't forget that, because those types of people don't just, wear striped suits and live in the movies. There really is good and evil out there. And, if you're right now reading the Bible, in a particular part of the Bible, I would encourage you to read Matthew 13. Just a phenomenal chapter. Most of the chapter is red letters, which to me is always just like mind-boggling that God actually came down here and talked in the form of his son, Jesus. So when you're reading the red letters, those are Jesus's words. And Matthew was a doctor by trade, and so he's, at least from my perspective, he seems pretty literal. He tries to capture things, and he probably didn't have the best sense of humor, just guessing. But what's fascinating about Matthew 13 is Jesus will tell the parables, clearly says to the people that for the most part there have been the matriarchs and patriarchs of old, of the Hebrew people, had wanted to see and couldn't see, wanted to hear and couldn't hear. And now I'm here and I'm talking to them. Jesus is talking to them, and he's saying they can't see and hear me, which is wild. He says, but for those of you that can, wow, what a moment for you, right? They've waited their whole lives. They've been the haves. They've been the elites. They've been kind of ruling over the Hebrew people. And Jesus shows up and they don't recognize him. And for the most part, they start trying to kill him, the whole part of his life. But this is interesting. I'll focus on one area here. So Matthew 13:17, Jesus says, red letters, "For truly I tell you, many prophets and righteous people have longed to see what you see, but did not see it, and to hear what you hear, but did not hear it. Listen then to what the parable of the sower means." This is fascinating. This is one of the parts of the chapter I really like. Jesus spoke in parables and clearly said that he spoke in parables to kind of cloak it in mystery for those that weren't supposed to see it or hear it. But it would be understood through the power of the Holy Spirit to those that God wanted to understand. And so you get into this predestination thing, which to me has always been fascinating. It wigs out other people. It doesn't really wig me out very much because it's just a little bit mind-boggling. But it says, listen to them what the parable of the sower means. And he goes on to describe the parable of the sower, which is fascinating. We all know it. But when you get down to the good soil, he says, but the seed falling on good soil refers to someone who hears the word and understands it. This is the one who produces a crop yielding 160 or 30 times what was sown. Very interesting. So let's just take Jesus at his own words. We all want to be good soil. We understand that. We don't want to be the thorny soil, because it says the seed falling among the thorns refers to someone who hears the word, but the worries of this life and the deceitfulness of wealth choke the word, making it unfruitful. Okay? I've heard a lot of folks talk about this, and it really doesn't need a lot of commentary, does it? Jesus he's wise beyond anything we could possibly comprehend. And he says, the seed falling among the thorns refers to someone who hears the word, so you can hear it, but then the worries of this life and the deceitfulness of wealth choke the word. Unbelievable. Making it unfruitful. So when we're called to be not part of the world, that's the warning, is that you could literally hear the word and it wouldn't bear any fruit in you. The Holy Spirit you basically are an apple tree that just the little bitty fruit starts to grow and falls off. And then the good news here is the seed falling on the good soil refers to someone who hears the word and understands it. Okay? This is the one who produces a crop. So when I'm in a fix-up, startup, or just in a business environment, the first thing I do is look at culture. I'm in the process of writing my first book, and in working with the publisher and getting the assistance you get, it's, hey man, what do you think the number one thing is in business based on your 30 plus years of experience? No doubt it's culture. When I've said culture eats strategy for breakfast, which is interesting because nobody takes credit for that. It's been out there, but nobody says I invented it. So I didn't invent it, but I probably used it more than anybody. It's true. The culture is the ecosystem of the business. And so it doesn't make a polar bear bad if you're building a, arid desert environment. But the polar bear simply is not going to prosper there. So some of what you're doing in business isn't good people, bad people. It's right people. It's got to get, and there's not even wrong people. It's just cruel. It's like I can't take a coyote and put him in where he has to swim all the time, where he doesn't have any land. And so a lot of times in business, when we're looking at the culture, it's just kind of you have to be very discerning of, without being judgmental, that it's not unfair to pick people that will prosper in the culture, just as you would in an aquarium, right? And that's real important. You have to mix that culture with a mindset that I was taught early in life, which is the people at the top of the business work for those under them. And when you say that, it doesn't make sense until you understand, well, how? What do you mean? You remove obstacles. You provide the tools. You care about them. You provide opportunity for growth. You give them the tough love that they need, like Nick Saban was saying last week about how you can, the process for what it takes to be a winner. You don't have, it's not like, behind the 36 doors, pick one. You really only have a couple of avenues to go to be really successful. It takes discipline, sacrifice, hard work, but it also takes coaching, and it takes, care from somebody above who might know the path better than you. And I've always tried to be a leader that can walk backwards on the path and know it so well that I can face the people that rely upon me and try to help them. And so number one in culture, if you're running the business, or if you run a department, or if you have any followers, any employees at all, any team members that work for you, either like literally or as a team leader, then you have to understand that your obligation is to work for them, to remove their obstacles, to help provide them clear messaging, provide a clear vision, and then give them a process like Nick Saban talked about last week. He didn't talk about it that much, but we all know process. You've got to deliver the process for, how you go about the planning, how you communicate amongst all departments, how information flows up and down, where problems get resolved in the business, which is what we talked about last week with problem worship. A problem worship culture exists because of poor leadership. And so the leaders are the ones that pay the first price, because they're always bogged down doing everybody else's job. And it's, as I said last week, if I'm doing your job, who's doing mine? And that applies all the way down. And so the other part about culture that for me is that you can't have a bunch of me, right? Everybody can't be a me, and everybody can't be you. If you're really capable, right? Like I can't go do the welding in the business. The welder can. I can't do all of those incredible trade and craftsmanship that people do, with architecture or with, engineering or, framing a house as a carpenter. I can't do all that. So when you're building your business, if you're, mega capable, you have to build your business kind of down in the organization where it's simplified and duplicatable for just the average employee. And we're not judging them for being average. The majority of your employees are going to be in that bucket, right? And so my point being there that you have to build your business, your processes, your communications for people that just the normal people. And those normal people are going to make or break you. And so anyway, I think that's real important when we talk about culture, that if you're running the business, or if you're running the department, or if you're a team leader in any way, then you have an obligation to deliver for those people. Second point on culture is probably the most important thing. When I go into a business and we look at it, somebody says, hey, can you just look at it? And I do that a lot. I don't even charge people. Or, hey, can you get involved? And I'm becoming pickier because I've gotten into it, and I like to fix the problems. And I know that if I leave with advice that they may not be able to fix them. So I end up getting stuck. And I'm like, I've got to stop doing that. I don't want to do that anymore. I want to be more of a thought leader, and I have a lot of thoughts there, and they're very effective. I've got to get better at helping people do it and not needing me to do it for them. And so that's my challenge. But as you go into the business, one of the most important things, once you have gotten the structure first, the people second, you have to look at the structure of the business just like a building. If it's leaning, if you're having issues, foundation sinking, that foundation and that structure are simply the org chart. And when I was at University of Alabama, I was getting my master's in, at the time, was organizational development, which is a part of human resources, the good part. And we were taught structure first, people second. I thought, wow, that's interesting. And it actually turns out to be true. So you look at the structure. How is it set up? It needs to be structured based on the business, not personalities, not people. A structure is without humans, with no names, is purely role. This role, and then these roles report to them, and then these roles. And a lot of folks get so bogged down in the deep detail of every job description that they cop out on the org chart. Start with titles. Start with just a basic function and go, I need somebody to run, project management. So project management manager, whatever. You can go back and fill it in. Once you've done that, you've got your structure in there, then you start getting the right people in there. This is what we're talking about today, is the people part, because it's tricky. It really is tricky. But somebody in that business has to lead the good people to be good. I find it fascinating that we'll talk about the next part, chapter 24 of Matthew 13, which I think is just fascinating. It really hit me this week, and Gwen and I talked about it. But somebody has to lead the good people to do good. And the next thing I do after structure and people is I make a challenge to everybody in the business, starting with me. Let's do our best work of our careers starting now together. That's the inspiration that comes along. And people, if you're a change agent, or if you're in a position where you're like, hey, we have to evolve our business. I mean, the model we're in is stale. You can see the competition. I've got to figure out how to go this next 10, 15 years in my business. What we did last 10 years won't work. So you need smart change, right? Not change for change's sake, but smart change that works, change that delivers. That's scary. People tend to live comfortably miserable. Just they're miserable, and they'll tell you about it, but they're more comfortable there than they are what it takes to change. They will resist the change because it's more uncomfortable than the misery. And so you'll be shocked how many people will stay there. It can be fear. It can be ignorance. It could also just be, we don't know what to do, and we're going to stay here till we figure it out. And it's like, well, you're going to die there, right? And so we work into a business, the structure, the people. I just said a lot. When you address the structure, that eliminates roles. When you address the people, it's right seat, wrong seat. I have a saying that cats don't bark, right? If you're asking a cat to bark, then it won't work. And there's nothing wrong with a cat, but if it's a dog job, if you need a woof woof, then a meow meow isn't going to cut it. So you have to get the woofs and the meows where they belong in the business, and there's probably some bad news. And if Uncle Joe or nephew Sally works in the business, if they don't belong, then you make the tough decision. The other reason we make tough decisions in business, and this is where most, I think, executives miss it, is for the good people that are there, that do fit. You may not live in the department with the pervert manager, or you may not live in the factory where the really poor manager that doesn't communicate well, that doesn't follow any of what the company says it does, doesn't live up to the core values, but the people do. And like I said, you work for them. You work for the managers, but more importantly, really, you work for every single employee in that business. And you'll never accomplish it. And don't be always and never with me, because there is no always and never except for what God says. But you have to deliver for the common guy in the business. And I'm pretty aggressive on removing bad actors and looking for them. And if you see, employees over there tapping SOS, that they're like, this guy's not at all what you think he is. He's a turd, and he's oppressing me. Then when you remove those people, those leaders, the people are like, wow, I can't believe. I mean, you have no idea how many times in business, on the third day, or by the end of the second week, I have removed the cobras from the business. And people, that's a good one. When people really get upset with me when I start talking about, banditos in the business, culture bandits, and king cobras in the baby crib and stuff like that. But let's look at Matthew 13 and see if God has any wisdom on what we're talking about. Sometimes we're just talking about bad players, bad actors. Okay, so this is Matthew 13, chapter 24. This is the parable of the weeds. One of my favorites. It hit me last week more than it ever has. Jesus told them another parable. Now red letters, Jesus' words. The kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while everyone was sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and went away. When the wheat sprouted and formed heads, then weeds also appeared. The owner's servants came to him and said, "Sir, didn't you sow good seed in your field? Where then did the weeds come from?" "An enemy did this," he replied. The servants asked him, "Do you want us to go pull them up?" "No," he answered, "because while you are pulling up the weeds, you may uproot the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. At that time I will tell the harvesters, first collect the weeds and tie them in bundles to burn. Then gather the wheat and bring it into my barn." Fascinating. So then he goes on to tell the mustard seed, okay? And let's don't stop there, because if you scroll down a little bit, he tells another parable. But then Jesus is cool, because Jesus is cool. Jesus said, let's see here. Okay, so the parable of the weeds explained, chapter 36. I'm sorry. Verse 36, chapter 13, verse 36. Then he left the crowd and went into the house. Okay, so he's out there telling the parable to the crowd, where there are good ears and bad ears. There are followers and non-followers. There are those that are going to yell, "Crucify him" later, and there's those that are going to love Jesus and believe in him. Okay, so he leaves the crowd and goes into a house, smaller group. His disciples came to him and said, "Explain to us the parable of the weeds in the field." So Jesus answered, red letters again, "The one who sowed the good seed is the Son of Man." Okay, that's Jesus. "The field is the world, and the good seed stands for the people of the kingdom." Okay, I'm going to stop right there. Jesus is saying that the Son of Man sowed the good seed, which are the people, the good people of the kingdom. Okay, now, red letters again at the end of 38. "The weeds are the people of the evil one." In other translations, the devil. "And the enemy who sows them is the devil." That's what he says. "The harvest is the end of the age, and the harvesters are the angels." Jesus says, "As the weeds are pulled up and burned into the fire, so it will be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send out his angels, and they will weed out of his kingdom everything that causes sin and all who do evil. They will throw them into the blazing furnace, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. Whoever hears, let them hear." Dang. So what that tells me, and look, when you read the Bible, you need to ask for the help of the Holy Spirit to understand, because God will speak to you through the Holy Spirit. You don't have to listen to what mankind says. But this rang truer with me than ever before. The one who sowed the good seed is the Son of Man. So there is seed on the earth, because he said that he said that the field is the world. Okay, so that we have the world, and God through Jesus sows the good seed. That's those of us that will, through God's providence, he knows we will accept him, and we will be his people. The weeds are the people of the evil one. Okay, and the enemy who sows them is the devil. And it's interesting, you say, well, why wouldn't God just, not have weeds? Well, the devil did that. And you say, well, why wouldn't God just get rid of the weeds early on? Well, because it would have pulled up the good wheat. And so there has to be a growing time together, and then eventually there's a harvest. The reason I bring this up is because it is absolutely true, whether we like it or not, whether you're mature enough to see it or not, that there are people that are of evil. And I'll tell you a story. If you've not heard the story of the scorpion and the frog, I'll tell it now. So there was a time where there was a big flood, and the scorpions that lived along the bank of the river swole up so fast that the scorpions were being wiped out by the flood, because they can't swim, and they particularly can't make it in white water. They'll drown. And the frogs, on the other hand, were, relatively unaffected. I mean, other than not getting struck by lightning, the frogs are like, it's no big deal. And so at that day, as the banks were swelling and the waters were roaring, a young frog was going across the river, having to struggle slightly, but no fear whatsoever because he's a frog. And about that time, a young scorpion, who he had seen before, they'd not crossed paths, but they could see each other, in and around the riverbank. The scorpion is going up and down. He's obviously going to drown. And he says, Mr. Frog, I know that we're not friends and our people have fought for years. He said, but please show mercy on me, Mr. Frog. If you don't help me, I surely will drown. And the frog remembers his teaching and he looks at the scorpion and he starts to assess and he goes, I know I'm not supposed to even talk to these things, but he's going to die if I don't save him. And so the scorpion is bobbing up and down, coughing up water. He's about to drown. He comes up, please, Mr. Frog, if you don't save me, it's as if you've murdered me. You have the power. Just drag me to yonder bank, and we'll forever, we'll have a bond between us. You will have done right, and you will have helped me. The frog goes, it's only about 70 feet. So he reaches over, he grabs the old scorpion. The scorpion is just about dead. He's almost limp. He's coughing, and he gets up on the frog's back. And the frog is paddling, and they had a very interesting conversation. As the scorpion could clear his throat, he's like, Mr. Frog, I thank you so much. I will forever be in your debt. You've saved my life, and if you would not have saved me, I surely would have died. Thank you so much. And the frog said, you're welcome. And about that time, the frogs felt the most terrifying sting, the worst feeling he's ever felt, right in the middle of his back. And he could feel the scorpion chuckling before he heard him laughing. And Mr. Frog began to paralyze, and they were 70, 60 feet from the bank. Water was tumultuous. And Mr. Frog kind of looked back at the scorpion, who had a smile on his face, and he said, Mr. Scorpion, I don't understand. I saved your life, and now you've killed me, and by killing me, you've killed yourself. He said, now we're both going to drown. Why wouldn't you have just drowned and let me live? And the scorpion laughed and said, Mr. Frog, I'm a scorpion. It's in my nature to kill frogs. And they both sank to the bottom of the river and drowned. And this is a tough story, but it's about human nature. It's about human nature because humans can, in a moment where they're trying to fight for their survival, they can emulate, they can fake, or they could even become docile and peaceful for a minute. But at the appropriate time, they will revert to their nature. And what Matthew 13, I believe, is talking about is people's nature. You have people with a good nature that are of God, that are of Jesus. And you have people with a bad nature that are of their father, the devil. And, Jesus gets pretty rowdy with the Pharisees and the Sadducees. How would you feel if Jesus showed up and said, oh, woe unto you, Mel, hypocrite and, liar? I'd be like, holy cow, what did I do? He went after him in Matthew, if you'll read it. He went after him hard. And why? Because he told him, you are of your father, the devil, and you are deceiving my people. And so when I'm in business, and we'll shift out of that, not trying to be Reverend Mel right now, but it's important because people look at me and they say, you go into business and you can really be a hard ass, you can, and I'm like, no, I'm trying to save the good people, right? So I call it the frog pond. I'm looking at those people, and there are frogs that don't belong in our business because they're not any good at the job I need them to do. And I don't, what we've talked about so far is the structure first, the people second, going into the business and saying to everybody, literally in person, hey, I'm Mel Blackwell. I'm here. I'm going to do my best work. I need a commitment from you. You're going to do your best work now too. Best work of your career right now together. And if we can get everybody to do that, and then we can start replacing worst practices with best practices, and we get everybody rowing in the same direction, and we don't ask somebody to block next to a big club-footed poor blocker, that happens to be related to somebody, so he stays on the offensive line. You make a commitment to people that there's a range of acceptability of how good you are to be able to keep your job. Not everybody's Superman, but you got to be good, and you start with that, and then people start defining, well, what do you mean the best work of my career? And that's the good question, because what you really say to them is, you look them dead in the eye and you say, I want you to be the best person you've ever been. I want you to take that home. I want you to take that to work. I want you to take that to your community. I want that to be present here. Be the best version of yourself. And you can transform not just the work environment, but that culture goes home. And all of a sudden, the mom who's a working mom goes home and people go, you seem to really be liking your job better. And it's a myriad of different things. But if you can get a group of people to understand, hey, look, we're going to take care of the good people. We're going to be good people. We're going to be good people that do the best work of our career, and we're going to use best practices because it's kung fu. And we're going to use the best kung fu, and we're going to be some show enough grasshopper kung fu mother scratchers. That's how you go about the transformation of the business, and then you have to deliver. And we have things like EOS that I utilize, which is simply a rounder wheel. It's an incredible system that can just be rolled out in any business, and it's fantastic. But I hope that's helpful. I think a lot of what we try to do in business is removing those obstacles. And you, as a business leader or a manager or a team leader, whatever it is, your job is to try to lessen the slope of the treadmill as much as possible. As a leader, when we say, hey, we don't settle, we don't like mediocrity. Mediocrity is ugh. Mediocrity is just simply unacceptable. I've never liked it in business. It's oil and water to me. And then you move to, that's kind of the structure part of it and how you set it up. But then you move to the people part. What a difference a person makes in a business to get the right person that fits the culture, that is the cat in the cat chair, and then you kind of change the version of what is the lowest common denominator in the business. So I call it the LCD. And a lot of businesses, they tolerate and they manage to the LCD, the lowest common denominator of people, of process, of whatever. And that's mediocrity. That's where somebody says, well, how do you find mediocrity? Well, you go to look for lowest common denominator, people, processes, managers, you look for, I always speed things up tremendously when I walk in, just to prove to people you can do twice as much as you think you can. But you just got to get on the right process. You got to get the right structure, get the right people, get the right culture, get the right attitude. And it's true. It's always happened. But that lowest common denominator, we'll get into that at another time, is real important, because in a business, a marriage, a relationship, a church, I said earlier that you want to be able to set your business up to be duplicated at a lower level. That's true. But you have standards. Mediocrity is too low. So once you eliminate mediocrity, then what's quote unquote lower in the company is actually looking more like a high common denominator. There may be more capable management, there may be more skilled positions, but you have a benchmark, you have a standard, and you expect it. And to do that, though, you have to roll out tools. So I'll wrap this up in like one little bow, and we'll get into this in other podcasts, but somebody has to lead the good people to do good. And it seems to me, and I think it would be obvious to you, tell me if you agree with this, the weeds and the spreader of the weeds kind of has it made. I mean, he's going to burn in hell for eternity, but for now, the weed spreader, think about weeds in your front yard. They just pop up. There's no effort whatsoever, right? It's just a turd in the punch bowl. It's like, dadgummit, and you have to, the farmer has to work really hard at dealing with those weeds. If you let the weeds grow up too much, they'll choke out the wheat. Business is the same thing. It takes a steward. It takes a shepherd. It takes a leader. It takes a tough guy. It takes a gun-toting cowboy in the right moments to stare down that evil on behalf of all the good people, those weeds. And you go, oh, Lord, I was talking about evil in business. You know what I'm saying. Come on. The bad guys do that. They try to make the one who's speaking the truth radical, or can't believe he said that. I mean, look, they did it to Jesus. He's a lot better than me. But my detractors have always done that. Oh, I can't believe he talked about cobras. But you call it like you see it. Why? Because I've got to lead the good people. I've got to protect the frog pond. I've got to work against the weeds. There are weeds. And so that's what we do, and I hope that's helpful for you guys. And we're going to switch a little bit into some pretty cool stuff here. it gets a little scientific, but I hope you'll hang with me because I think there's something to it, and I think it'll be helpful for everyone. This is interesting stuff here. So this is you had a retired general on the Sean Ryan show, and he was talking about the future of energy, and when we think of solar as solar panels here on Earth, trying to capture, sun energy through our atmosphere, it's pretty primitive. Okay, that's pretty primitive. When you think of being able to get further outside of our atmosphere and capture solar energy, and then that's converted to a radio signal, and it's sent down to Earth through our atmosphere without any real interference. The radio signal can go through. It's not blocked by weather, clouds, or whatever. It's then received and converted back to electricity. It has an 80% efficiency rate. Today, our energy, as powerful as it is at the source, by the time it's transmitted to you, to your house, it has about a 20% efficiency rate. That's a delta increase of 60%, which is incredible. And that energy can be picked up anywhere on Earth. It can be picked up. You could have a little receiver you could take with you on a camping trip, and you could have full energy. So listen to what he says. I think this is fascinating. I will hit on 3 topics today that are meant to intrigue and encourage you to look into them further. But a couple of them are pretty heavy, but I want you to listen to them. Check out what this cat says.
20% efficiency in the current method of delivery of energy. The experiments in space are showing the promise of initial efficiency levels of 80% efficiency. By taking the energy of the sun and transforming it into a radio wave, the radio wave coming down to Earth, safe for humans, transmitted or received into a rectina, and then transferred back into electricity. You're receiving it at 80% efficiency. So now you're talking about an immediate jump of 60% efficiency. So now you're talking about what you see with computers, where back in the day,
I don't know. I didn't like the sound of that rectina. Hope that doesn't. Anyway, so you see what I mean? That's pretty slick. And so you have to understand when we're dealing with the smart people, the Elon Musks of the world that talk about, the future of energy as solar. It's fascinating. And then this next one talks about helium-3. I don't know if you guys have looked into helium-3, but you bear with me. Even the moms, the dads, the housewives, the business people that are like, oh, Mel's getting scientific. This is important stuff. This is tectonic plate shifting technology that is at our fingertips, and it does play into the world and what matters, because I do think fossil fuels, and I don't know if they're not fossil, whatever they are, but they're whatever God put on the earth that we can get through fracking, natural gas. These are very viable fuel sources, but we also have coming at our fingertips by being able to get outside of our atmosphere, potentially get to the moon and mine helium-3, which China's doing and we're not. So we'll talk about that. Being able to get solar capture devices up above our atmosphere that can send it down. This is slick stuff. But listen to what this gentleman, same thing Sean Ryan show, is talking about helium-3.
Here's an example. About a month ago, Microsoft announced their quantum computing capability, which is just next level and awesome. But they need to cool it down to 80 millikelvin, which basically is almost down to the point where the molecules don't even move. Okay. There's really no way to cool it efficiently down to that level. Hydrogen would only get you down to maybe 1 Kelvin. You need to go, much lower than that. Helium-3 can do it like that. So let's take a scenario where China now has enough helium-3 as they're mining it on the moon and bringing it back to Earth to be able to power the entire world for thousands of years. And they are the ones that can actually operationalize quantum because they can cool it down to the temperature it needs to actually operate. Now, quantum sensing, quantum communication, when you start looking at and quantum computing, when you start combining those 3 quantum capabilities, sensing, computing, communication, and you can affordably cool it down to the levels where it can be operationalized. Now you've broken every code that ever was. I don't care how good your encryption is. They see every secret, every code, everything. And there are efforts to do these other things, but it's not fueled by the kind of money to operationalize it and really compete. This is why, strategy eats technology for lunch.
Man, this is really alarming. I mean, who knows what they're doing over there? We know
we know they're mining. Okay, we know they're bringing back, because we can see what they're bringing back, and this is all open source. We can, in open source, you can see some of the things that China's doing, and so we have evidence of some of the things they're doing, but we don't know the extent.
So, a lot to unpack there. I'm not going to go too deep into it. Bottom line here is that helium-3, which obviously is readily available on the moon, there is truly a dark side of the moon. And I had to learn this at one point. I'm not assuming everybody really believes that or knows it, but yeah, there's a side of the moon, the back side of the moon we don't see just by the way of the array of the Earth and the moon in orbit. China has been on the back side of the moon doing something, and what this cat is saying is we can see that they're transporting something back. They're going up there and they're coming back. They're going up there and they're coming back. Well, helium-3 would be a game changer if one country had it and one didn't. So if you could imagine that all the helium-3 existed underground in China, they would have a huge advantage. Not meaning to scare anybody, but I think it's important. We're kind of in a technological middle of our podcast today. There are concerns that we have big farming mixing with big chemical, and we have people playing God with soil microbes. And so obviously we've depleted the soil. You've had a situation where you've had big farms are replacing small farmers. The small farmers cannot compete, right? So they sell out. The property tax world that's set up for farmers, when you try to hand them off generation to generation, depending on how that affects a small farm, a lot of times, unless the kids are really going to farm it, they have to sell it. So you've had this consolidation that's gone on in a lot of industries that's gone on in farming. But there's a correlation between big farming and stupid stuff, playing God, okay? So when you get on big farming, you have to have scale. You have to have scale on a new level. And to me, the bad guys in that equation, they're very eloquent. Okay, they're like, to me, Obama was always, it's amazing to listen to him. You get finished, you go, dang, that dude, I almost like him. But I didn't like what he was doing, but he was very capable and very eloquent. He could spin it. And so the big spin on the farming is, well, we have to do it to feed the masses around the world. And it's like, okay. And, we have to do it because we've depleted the soil. Okay. But the way you do that in the old ways, the ways that are sustainable for Earth in organic farming, is you rotate the crops and you save your seed stock and that sort of thing. Well, no, these guys are they're bioengineering soil, and they've been doing bioengineering on genetically modified seeds and organisms. And so this is interesting. Listen to this segment, and we'll talk a little bit more about it. And then segment after this is, I saw that Brockovich was in it, and it caught my attention, obviously, because of Julia Roberts plays her in the movie. But she's got a new cause, and I want to play that too, and it's related to farming.
Freak out when someone talks about editing germline genes in people. These are the genes in the reproductive cells that make sperm and eggs, essentially a la carte designing of people. Everybody seems to be able to see that's problematic, ethically and otherwise. Yet right under our noses, Big Ag is genetically engineering soil microbes. Why? Is the dirt that's been on this earth for millennia not good enough? Genetically modifying organisms in the dirt will have far-reaching effects that could be disastrous. The arrogance of biochemical engineers astounds me. The usual ag giants like Bayer, Syngenta, and BASF are manipulating yet another aspect of agriculture. They've packaged up these new biologicals with super herbicides like glyphosate and atrazine, with genetically modified seeds, put a bow on it, and called it regenerative agriculture. Well, I like the old regenerative agriculture with seed saving, crop rotation, livestock innovation, crop overlay. People can argue about the safety of glyphosate and atrazine, but one thing's for sure, Big Ag is going to have a proprietary lock on the whole of farming at the rate they're going. You're going to need the new GE microbes to nourish the GE seeds. 2 live GE microbes are currently being used on millions of acres of U.S. farms, and the EPA's website states they've registered 8 more. These are organisms like bacteria, fungi, viruses, algae, protozoa. Genetic modifications can move between species and national boundaries on the wind. When these are released into the environment, you can't gather them back up again. The regulatory agencies that oversee their use have no monitoring protocols on the spread and environmental effects. We don't know what genes have been modified. That's trade secret information that's redacted from most of the application documents. Experience tells us that monsters can emerge when you mess with microbiome balance, especially their genes. The EPA and the USDA need to step up regulatory review on biologicals. Here's another good reason to buy organic.
Very interesting. So I did some research on this, okay? And I don't think that the interest is so great that you want me to spend a lot of time on it, but it is something, it is important. I wanted to look into how big food and big bio and big farming, which are kind of centralizing global architecture, and contrast that to the decentralized small farm practices, okay, which tend to be more natural and organic. And there's definitely a correlation between the big food, big bio, big farming, and the use of synthetic chemicals, GMOs, including these genetically engineered soil microbes. And those have potential health and environmental risks. They really do. And I'm always fascinated that people will demonize one element of, climate change or whatever, and then they'll turn over and be inventing freaking Frankenstein stuff over on the other side, which are playing God. They're kind of playing God in both, right? Telling us, be scared, do this, live, less lavishly while they fly around in jets. And on the other hand, they literally go into a laboratory and they're freaking Dr. Frankenstein with this stuff. But there are safety issues that are concerned with this, and it's real. So some of the areas I focused on, the centralized versus decentralized farming. Okay, so centralized farms, you have companies like Bayer, Syngenta, BASF. Okay, and these are massive companies that focus on scale, and they use genetically engineered soil microbes, GMOs, synthetic chemicals on a large scale because it makes their model work, right? Contrast that to decentralized smaller farms, which is also an interesting model because your food grows closer to you. The supply chain, there's a plus and a minus to that, right? Because if you live in an area and you get your food from local farms, relatively local, say at least within your state, and then you buy things that you want that don't grow in your state from other states. If your state had a catastrophe of some kind, a drought, some sort of event, then yeah, your food chain, supply chain might be disrupted. So you don't have to have it all, right? But I think more local farming makes a lot more sense for the humans and the animals than these big mother scratchers that grow all this stuff and do all these things, and they start leveraging Frankenstein God complex tactics. So the smaller farms tend to be more organic. They have lower risks in terms of the chemicals they use. They support biodiversity and local sustainability. So it seems to me like we ought to be fighting for that. And we can talk more about that. Okay, then the next one is regulatory complicity. Which way does the regulatory machine want this to go? Well, obviously, the grift. The guy that goes and makes $175,000 a year for 5 years and comes home with $20 million. Okay, how'd that happen? I sound like an old fart now, but it's true. And more than ever, I see it. But the EPA, the USDA, they're not monitoring it. They're looking the other way. And this is kind of a self-regulated environment where these big outfits do what they want, and they pay the regulatory agencies to either look the other way or approve it. If you don't believe me, just look at what Purdue Pharmaceuticals did. Just look at big anything, big tobacco, big pharma. They go off the rails, and the regulatory agencies that are supposed to protect us don't. So remember our on the Mel Blackwell Experience, our definition of trust is you can trust somebody to do what you've seen them do. That's your trust factor. It's a power word. It's not a weak word. I can trust big pharma to act like big food, to act like big farming. It's what they do. I can trust regulatory agencies to get their palms greased and or be hoodwinked, whatever it is, or blackmailed, and they look the other way. They let the bad stuff happen. Last point on this, let's look at where these companies are headquartered. Bayer Monsanto, the Bayer Ag Group, headquartered in Germany. Remember what Norm said. They acquired Monsanto, and they're headquartered in Leverkusen, and they're a leader in pharmaceuticals and agriculture. Glad they combined those two. Then Syngenta is in Switzerland. They acquired Chem China, and they focus on agrochemicals and seeds. So they're the ones that are frankenseeding us. BASF, headquartered in Germany. They're the world leader in chemical. They're the world's leading chemical company, strong in crop protection, chemicals to protect crops. And then Corteva, I guess that's how you say it, Corteva, in the United States. They're a spinoff of Dow DuPont, and they focus on agricultural innovation. I said that was the last point, but it's not. So these are global entities that are impacting American farms. Do we have farm sovereignty? And they're doing things Frankenstein-like with our soil. And I can assure you our regulatory agencies are not doing their job. The last point here is the movements between big food, big pharma, and big government, okay? So you've got people that move from being a chief of staff at the USDA, and they move to, working within the organization. So there's a revolving door of people that are supposed to protect us, that they leave the government agency and they go to work for one of these big pharmaceutical companies or one of their affiliates. And you say, I wonder if there's a conflict of interest. All right. So now we're going to move into another interesting story about Erin Brockovich's new cause. Really interesting, honestly. Looking at this, it's a little spooky. So I hate to spook you, but I think it's worth looking at. It's a documentary that looks at sludge farming, which right out of the gate, I go, wait, what? Sludge? What is sludge? We're going to put that on our food or our soil. And then it's being contaminated with PFAs, right? So what's a PFA? A PFA is a polyfluoroalkyl substance. Polyfluoroalkyl, whatever. It's bad. These contaminants are basically heavy metals, pathogens, and other organic pollutants. And so you say, well, what is sludge? Well, sludge comes from, there's these forever chemicals that are in the sludge that's made out of human waste. So the sewage, the American sewage world had to do something with this sludge. And what they decided to do with the sludge is they used it to make a fertilizer product, and they got farmers to put it down on their fields. And the result is in this documentary.
EPA, FDA, political leaders, where have you been? How did you miss this? That now we have an entire country that could potentially be in peril from this forever chemical that's destroyed your land, destroyed our farming, destroyed our water, and destroyed public health and welfare. Wow.
There's so much sadness and anger.
This has broken our hearts and crushed our spirit. And I don't know if we'll ever get that back.
Told their farms are shot through with chemicals linked with liver damage, damage to fertility, thyroid issues, and cancer.
All of this land has been poisoned, water contaminated, all of these people touched by this.
Called forever chemicals because they are nearly impossible to destroy. Prime soil, crops, milk tainted in the heartland, leaving many farmers on the brink of ruin.
Suicide among dairy farmers and farmers in general is incredibly high because a lot of these farms, a third, fourth, and fifth generation, you are going to be the person to lose it. Your great-great-great-grandfather cleared the land, and you are going to be the person to have a bankruptcy auction because you can't hold on to the land.
This is the story of how their farmland was destroyed right out from under them.
Greed, money.
We'll take you to ground zero of where it all began.
You never wanted to be an activist.
I just wanted to milk our cows and be left to hell alone.
And show you how far back the paper trail goes.
When they had the choice of do we go public with this or do we sweep it under the rug, they chose the rug.
And with these chemicals now impacting 97% of Americans, according to the CDC, what you and your family need to know.
I am glad News Nation is looking into this problem. All of us, the entire country, will deal with the fallout.
Man, we got some crazy people doing things. All right, so how legitimate is this? I don't know. You heard it. There, you can watch the whole documentary on News Nation. I watched the whole thing. It was intriguing. A lot of problem, not a lot of solution. So somebody's going to have to get on this and solve it, but it sounds pretty bad. I don't know how many farms have used this sludge and therefore put all these PFAs. The PFAs are coming from the sewage. The PFAs are coming from chemicals that are in our bodies that go out into the sewage system, and then they don't biodegrade. So pretty dumb idea to take human sewage, given what goes into the, down the toilet and through all the industrial waste and all that, right? So it's not just what we eat, it's just the industrial waste that goes over there. Then let's take these chemicals and let's just roar it into our soil and see what happens. And so there's definitely been repercussions of it. These are toxic chemicals that don't go away. At this time, I don't know how they address this. And then once again, what I will focus on the EPA, because I'm looking at this here. The dangers are real, and there's a tremendous lack of oversight, and the industry influence, lobbying, and all that stuff's interconnected. And so it says PFAS, heavy metals, pathogens contaminate soil, water, crops, livestock. Health risks include cancer, developmental delays, just little things. So that can affect your livestock, that can affect all your crops, and that affects anything that we eat off that farm. So thanks, Frankenstein. The lack of oversight. There have not been any regulation changes. EPA regulations are unchanged since 1993. They're slow to address contamination. And then the Big Ag spent $500 million lobbying the 4 years of 2019 to 23. And then former lobbyists hold key agency positions, influencing policy. Same old thing. You can trust them to do it. Big pharma, big food could be good, but they're very dangerous when they go unchecked and unregulated. All right, this next segment's really it's one that hits close to me. When I was in high school, there were a couple things. When you walked out the back door of the high school, Prattville High School, you noticed down the hill was a really nice trade school. And you'd see it because that's where everybody went to dip and smoke, because that's the way we rolled back in the 82, 83, 84, 85, 86 years. I didn't smoke, but everybody else did. But you'd go stand there and you'd see the kids that were going down the hill about noon to go do their trade classes. And it's just the way things were. And we really respected those kids. I mean, those kids could fix anything. They could weld. I mean, these were some badass dudes and girls. So they were going down there to learn cosmetology and all different things. And it just shocks me that we got away from that. Like, who needs to know how to do actual trade craft? So, as you know, Mike Rowe is big into this. I don't always agree with Mike because I'm like, what are you saying? Like, sometimes he gets real close to a solution and then he takes it away from you. But he does know a lot about it. It is his passion, and I do respect him. So let's hear what Mike says on the subject, because Trump had come out, our president came out and said, hey, we'll just take these $3 billion away from Harvard and just give it to ag, schools. And of course, Mike goes, wait, whoa, it's more than that. But when you're at the top of something and you're trying to shape culture, what Trump's doing is he's making a point that if the government needs to invest in something, it doesn't need to give an institution with $54 billion in the bank money to go do whatever it's doing that may or may not be right. Let's reallocate the funds. But let's hear what Mike has to say.
The Ivy League, I'm sorry to say, has beclowned themselves in recent months, and Harvard has led the beclowning. part of what I love about the president's post is the fact that it's going to force conversations like this one. And a lot of taxpayers, Chris, for the first time, are going to realize that the Harvard Corporation is sitting on a $54 billion endowment. Their president is currently screaming that this post and the idea that they could lose their tax-exempt status and some of these grants and tax money, the idea that that could happen are, in his words, unconstitutional. Now, I'm not a constitutional lawyer, but I think he's mistaken. And I think that the optics here are terrible. And the first shoe to drop is going to be a gobsmacking realization on the part of a lot of regular Americans that this university is already sitting on $54 billion. What the actual hell does that even mean? So get past that and then ask yourself, well, why then would you want to give all that money to another bunch of schools? There's nothing magical about trade schools. I love them, but they're great ones and okay ones and some that fall below, right? So what we need as a people, as taxpayers, is some kind of means testing. You can't just give money to schools any more than you can give it to any random person because they need it or want it or have dreamt of it. So really, if you got $3 billion to close the skills gap, set aside a big chunk for a national scholarship program. Carve away a little bit of that to build an infrastructure that can evaluate the individuals on their merit, right? And then carve away a bigger chunk to start telling the stories and making a more persuasive case for the 7.6 million open jobs that exist right now, most of which don't require a 4-year degree. So in a binary world, give it to the trade schools. In the real world, the trade schools, that's not going to do it. We've got to get parents and guidance counselors and kids to think differently about the opportunities that are right in front of us.
That's a good point. I really do like Mike. His heart's good. It's in the right place. So he brings a little bit more nuance to it than, somebody just saying, yeah, I agree or don't agree. I do think that giving money to these elite institutions that are doing whatever there is they're doing, I don't know why the American government, I do know why. I know why they did it. It's control. When you hand that kind of money out to an educational system, you want centralized control. The government wants to control it. Well, if the government falls in the hands of idiots or bad people or just people that don't know what they're doing, they're wrong about they're going to get a really bad outcome. Centralization is dangerous. And so obviously there takes some infrastructure change. You can't just go give it to the trade school. First of all, there's not enough trade schools. They're not where they need to be. Trade school, by definition, is very decentralized. They really ought to be right outside the high school, and they ought to go back to the days when it worked. So there's a lot to do there if you really wanted to invest in the trades. His point about the 7 million, ish, jobs that are available, you have to remember too, there are about that many people that have quit looking for work. So they're the underemployed. They don't look, and our unemployment rates don't count them. Okay, check me on that because I'm right. So we remove anybody who's quit looking for work, given up on finding a job. We take them out of the unemployed numbers. That's just stupid. So if you're employable and you don't work, you should be in the unemployment number. It shouldn't be for a matter that you want to work. It should be that you can work. So when you look at that, I think the trades and teaching people these crafts that are very important for, human civilization to exist. So I think he makes a lot of sense. I want to throw out something here I think is very important. We throw around 1 million, we throw around 1 trillion, we throw around 1 billion all the time. And I don't know that we've just gotten so trite with it, but check this out. Okay. If you look at 1 million minutes, okay, 1 million minutes equals 1.9 years. Okay, so 1 million minutes goes by a little less than 2 years. That's comprehensible. I can comprehend that. Comprehensible, can you? 1 billion minutes, you'd be like, oh, it's just a little bit more. 1 billion minutes is 1,901 years. So whereas you and I have no problem saying, yeah, we'll live a few, million minutes, or however it's going to be X years. Nobody's going to live 1 billion minutes. 1 billion minutes, you'd have to be 1,900 years old to live 1 billion minutes. Let's go one step further. Let's talk about 1 trillion minutes. 1 trillion minutes is 1,901,285 years. Okay? So please keep that in mind when we start talking about billions and trillions. You know, when Harvard's sitting on $52 billion in money that they've hoarded away, and they're still taking in $3-4 billion a year from the government, which is mine and your money, what are we paying for people to go to Harvard? Like, you know what I mean? So Trump has a point. Let's give that money more to the people, like we talked about in our business. Let's push it down to the more common man, where that person can benefit from the government. There's more representation there to help the trade class and to give people that as a track for, and that trade could include a lot of things. It can get pretty technical too. I mean, there are technical trades. So I just thought that was really interesting. So keep that in mind. All right, so let's move into a little bit on the world stage, a little bit of the politics of the day, but it's pretty light. Listen to these two characters. We have some girl, I saw this, Libs of TikTok posted it, some girl who, I mean, I'm sorry, but she's clueless, talking with some guy who's clueless, and they're trying to discuss the Democrat Party's messaging and how they could reach out to men and what it means. And if you remember, we go all the way back to my first couple of podcasts when we talk about people, just be authentic. Don't try to figure out your quote unquote messaging. How do I say things to get people to vote for me or to put me in charge? How do I say the right things for them to cede power to me? That's crazy. It's like, be authentic, stand for something, we'll be able to see it. Okay, that's America. You be authentic, you state your case, we'll decide whether or not we want to have anything to do with you or not. But listen to these two clowns.
The reason why Republican messaging resonates with men is because men want bad things, right? It's like men want to have sex and like own women, right? Like they want to dominate everybody. And Republicans say you get to do that. And then Democrats can't say that. So we just lost men. It's over, right? Like, what are you talking about? Like a lot of times it will be men that are liberals who will like agree with that shit. I'm like, dude, what is going on? Like there's a lot of men that don't think that way, obviously. And it's just such a negative view to take on like half of the human race.
He does not look like a man.
I also think it's just so abundantly clear that the people who say these things don't actually spend time talking to young men. You know this because we know each other in real life, but I spend a lot of time on college campuses. Like a hog. And I spend a lot of time with
young men.
I love young men. I love frat guys. And in that, I realized, like, even the ones that identify as conservative are almost always pro-choice. They're almost always pro-gay marriage. You'd be surprised at the number of them who supported Black Lives Matter. And so I feel like people just kind of lump them into this box when the truth is, again, a lot of them are with us on the issues. They're just not part of our coalition because they feel like they're not welcomed in it.
Dadgum. I'm just give an idiot a microphone day for those two. I don't mean to make fun of them, but they deserve it. I mean, if you watch this, he's about as manly as he's not, okay? And then she's over there talking about whatever. I'm looking at her and I'm like, Lord have mercy. And neither one of them even going to get talked to, in the lunchroom at high school. I mean, they're not thought leaders in any way. And what they had to say was stupid. But it represents this initiative on one side of the political spectrum where they're trying to figure out their voice. They're trying to figure out their message. They're trying to figure out what I can say to get you to cede your power to me. And it's like, that's the problem. Just find somebody who's authentic that we can relate to, that we can believe in, that we believe will do what they say. So that brings us to the next segment, which is really tough. I mean, the whole abortion thing for me is I don't want to get in people's face on it because people have strong feelings. But on this segment, Tom Fitton, who's Judicial Watch, who goes after Republicans or Democrats for FOIA requests to try to get to the bottom of things that matter. Listen to what he talks about. I think this was an OAN segment where he talks about colleges and government institutions with government dollars selling baby parts. It's crazy. Really crazy.
Watch's President Tom Fitton speaking out on new damning documents showing the Obama-era FDA purchased fetal body parts. Here's One America's John Hines.
As the president of Judicial Watch, can you comment on reports of records that you have received from the Obama administration FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, of communications and contracts with a human fetal tissue provider that seems to show the FDA was buying, quote, intact calvarium baby skulls, 18 to 24 weeks, for $515 per skull? What do you make of this apparent sale of fetal body parts to the FDA?
Well, it ought to cause both moral and legal outrage on the part of United States citizens and taxpayers that their tax dollars are being used to purchase basically the dead bodies of unborn human beings. They divvy up their bodies, they sell their heads, they sell their livers, they sell other aspects of their body, and you see the price list.
Another interesting bit of information you uncovered, also stating here, documents, quote, documents previously uncovered in this lawsuit, according to your press release, that the federal government demanded the purchased fetal organs be, quote, fresh, never frozen. What do you make of that?
Well, if you want to, I don't know how any normal person could read that and not be horrified. They wanted the organs shipped on dry ice. This is awful stuff, and it highlights the humanity.
But it's actually happening.
Yeah, and it highlights the, these are organs. This isn't, a clump of cells. These are organs. These are baby skulls up to 24 weeks gestation. So there's no doubt that any normal person would call these a human being. And indeed, their organs are being sold, chopped up and sold. And, we have other documents in another lawsuit that we filed on behalf of the Center for Medical Progress that showed a massive operation in the University of Pittsburgh, again, funded with our tax dollars. Fauci's agency was involved in it as well. So Fauci should be asked about his agency support, in addition to gain of function research, chopping up organs. It was a fetal organ chop shop.
Fetal organ chop shop. Tying this into what we talked about, we opened up the broadcast with the goodness of people, that there is a good strain, and specific to what was mentioned, that in America, that's Americans. That's at the soul of being American and trying to do right and trying to take care of your brothers and sisters. And there's no part of this that makes any sense, does it? So they like to get us fighting over the issue of abortion from the standpoint of, well, you're for it, I'm against it, or I'm for it, you're against it. Okay, that's part of the dust cloud that they like to have kicked up. But why are they so for it? Like, what is it about? Like, why do they care? Like, they really care about your right to choose, or my body, all of that. You say, okay, that's some good. You'll pretty much Hatfield McCoy that one until both sides destroy themselves. But here's what both sides should look at. Y'all are doing what with the baby parts? Because there's your business model. Why would a government be so into this situation? It's because they're so, I think, at the very top of this, so freaking evil, in just inhumane. Frankenstein, Dr. Frankenstein, just kick it all to the curb and justify it somehow, that you basically create chop shops and you're using these. Oh, we're using them for science and research, and we're going to help people. And all of that. So I only bring that up just to show you that above those really controversial topics where they get me and you in there scrapping with each other, and we come out with bloody knuckles and we're like, I showed him. And they're over there with a ice chest full of baby heads and livers on dry ice. And we're not asking the question of, okay, we don't agree on this issue, but what are you son bitches doing up there with all these baby parts? You know what I mean? So, man, keep your eyes open. There's bad people. Our job as the good shepherds is to try to help the good people, and to be the family that picked up, fixed the truck, fed the the father and son, put them on the road, didn't ask for anything. That's America. All right, so we want to go into the Doge cuts. This is the wife segment of the podcast today. The Gwen question is, what do we make of what we're hearing of the Doge cuts? You know, Elon is gone. He's not staying past a certain point. We're hearing that the House didn't take up the Doge cuts in the One Big Beautiful Bill. What's really going on? Okay, first of all, let's address Elon Musk, quote unquote, stepping down. I predict you'll hear now that the media will try to make it sound like there's a rift between Elon Musk and the cabinet, or there's a rift between Elon Musk and Trump, and Elon Musk is frustrated and he's leaving. Now, is he frustrated? Probably so, because he knew going in, you know, the hardest place in the world to get something done is up there. And you're asking people to cut monies that are going into their pockets or going into pockets of people that have them blackmailed. They're either getting paid themselves or somebody's got dirt on them. And so they're either controlled or they're controlling. But number one fact is that Elon Musk is indeed a special government employee. Okay, that designation was confirmed by Caroline Leavitt, February 4th of 25. Okay, what that means, the special government employee role as defined by 18 U.S.C. 202A is temporary duties not exceeding 130 days in any 365-day period. So it's not. We knew going into this that unless we were going to break the law, if the minute that Trump made him a special government employee, he had a maximum 130-day term limit, which ends May 29th of 2025. So now, that's why it's ending today, okay? Secondly, you say, why didn't we get all of these Doge cuts in the House bill? The House doesn't have the capability of taking up that bill. Stephen Miller gave a good blurb on that. This is a smart cat. But the Senate could have like endorsed / gone along with those cuts, and X number of Republicans didn't, and they stalled it. But the One Big Beautiful Bill is not able to address those kind of cuts. So let me, without getting too granular, this is the wife question. Let's try to make sense. Okay, so Elon Musk is serving out his term, and it ends today. Okay, that's the way it was when he started. No, there's nothing new there. Per Stephen Miller, the Doge cuts are discretionary spending. Okay, the federal bureaucracy. They're under the Senate budget rule. Okay, per the Senate budget rule, you can't cut discretionary spending in a reconciliation bill. You can only do mandatory spending. So that's your big number, and everybody knows this, but they're playing it. Am I concerned that Doge cuts won't be made and the swamp is gonna alligator up? Yeah, totally. But the One Big Beautiful Bill was never going to address those cuts, because those cuts are to discretionary spending. Only the mandatory spending was in the reconciliation bill. So the Doge cuts would have to be done by what is known a rescissions package on an appropriations bill. Okay, the Big Beautiful Bill is not an annual bill and does not fund the departments of government. It does not finance our agencies or federal programs. Instead, it includes the single largest welfare reform in American history, along with the largest tax cut in reform in American history, the most aggressive energy exploration in American history, and the strongest border bill in American history, all while reducing the deficit. So, in the world of swamp bills, the One Big Beautiful Bill is probably as good as we get, and the pressure needs to stay on the House and the Senate to take up the Doge bills, which is our next clip.
So, rumor has it that we got a big rescission package, an Elon Musk Doge rescission package coming up. Can you confirm it?
I can. We'll be sending that up on Monday or Tuesday whenever the House is back in session. They will get our first rescissions bill. And again, this has been proposed and we've talked about it. We want to make sure that Congress passes its first rescissions bill, including the Doge, and we will send more if they pass it. And so this is the first one is foreign aid. USAID cuts, many of the waste and garbage that was funding not only wasteful but hurting our foreign policy, but also the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and NPR. We'll be sending that up, and we're working with Congress, and we've had good conversations to make sure that they knew what was coming. They had some input as to changes that could be made to make it something that could pass the House, and we're excited for that to occur next week.
All right. So that concludes the wife question of the day. I believe you're watching the sausage be made. Obviously, we don't trust the uniparty. Obviously, there's guys on the right, the left, the blue, the red, the you name it up there. If you're in Washington, D.C., you're either on the take or you're blackmailed. You hate to say stuff like that, but it's becoming obvious. But focus now on these specific bills that the White House pushes to the House and the Senate, where we're going to ask them to make specific DOGE cuts, okay? So hopefully that makes sense. Elon was always going to go away. The One Big Beautiful Bill cannot address DOGE cuts. The Senate did screw it up when they didn't condone them a few weeks back, but Trump's about to hammer down on them to try to get the cuts done. Will they happen? It's the swamp. And so the last part of this I was going to work on is the situation with Israel. Before I get to that, tariffs, the judges, district judges shutting down tariffs, what a freaking mess. I mean, in the history of America, I don't care whether you're a Democrat president or a Republican president, the district courts are out of control. You have executive powers, you have Article 1, 2, 3, you have a pinnacle of power, and these judge turds are doing this stuff. And so will be a battle, and Trump's going to continue with the tariffs. As you've seen now, the tariffs are there as a negotiation tactic. But as we look at Israel, no greater supporter of Israel in the way the Bible asks us to be than me and my wife and our family. We love Israel. Like I've said before, I don't always know where Israel's government stands with God. I mean, they've been all over the map in the Bible, right? And so you have to hope that what Trump's trying to do to negotiate peace is a better negotiation system than what, say, an Obama or John Kerry would do. So listen to Trump in his own words when he was asked, hey, did you ask Netanyahu to cool down just a minute and let's try one more round of negotiations, and I'll try to give you my spin on that.
Back on Iran, did you warn Prime Minister Netanyahu against taking some sort of actions that could disrupt the talks there in a phone call last week?
Well, I'd like to be honest. Yes, I did. Next question, please.
Mr. President, just last on sanctions.
I did, yeah.
If Senate Republicans want to push
It's
forward.
not a warning. I said I don't think it's appropriate.
What exactly did you tell him? Did you
I just said I don't think it's appropriate. We're having very good discussions with him, and I said I don't think it's appropriate right now. Because if we can settle it with a very strong document, very strong, with inspections and no trust. I don't trust anybody. So no trust. I want it very strong where we can go in with inspectors, we can take whatever we want, we can blow up whatever we want, but nobody getting killed. We can blow up a lab, but nobody's going to be in the lab, as opposed to everybody being in the lab and blowing it up, right? Two ways of doing it. I told him this would be inappropriate to do right now because we're very close to a solution. Now, that could change at any moment, could change with a phone call. But right now, I think they want to make a deal, and if we can make a deal, save a lot of lives.
All right. Always tough when you read Revelation. Just, it all comes down to Israel. I think that Netanyahu has a right to be weary of Iran. I mean, I think that Trump is trying to say, look, I'm too close to what I think I can get a deal. I think Netanyahu's saying you can't make a deal with those guys. They're scorpions and we're frogs. And, you can't trust them. You can't, you can't make a frog deal with a scorpion. And I think Trump says, well, if we want to take out those facilities, we'll do it. But we'll do it a little bit further down the road. I don't want to blow them all up right now and send what could be some other alliances in the Middle East to crap. And so who's right, who's wrong, I don't know. But we're watching Trump double down again on trying to negotiate peace versus using force. But he's got Putin up there. It looked to me like the EU and Ukraine drone attacked Putin's helicopter. Okay, if that's accurate, it's probably why Putin's acting a little bit crazy right now. But Trump is trying to negotiate peace with the threat of force, but holding that stick back just a little bit longer. And I hope and pray right. Pray for him. It's not a game. It's not whose side you're on. We're on Israel's side. We're on the side of God. And it would be, one more step, I think, for Trump to go, I'm going to go one step further. And if these guys blink or do anything that they don't, if they raise that scorpion tail, we're going to smoke them. And so I think Netanyahu and Trump want the same thing, and they're having the kind of conversations you have in situations like this. But I think they'll end back up together pretty tight because we're not going to let Iran have a nuclear weapon. All right, we've reached near the end of our podcast today, and I just want to recap, kind of summarize what this is about. All good requires shepherds, leaders, to help turn the org chart upside down and serve the people of the business, the people of the community, the people of your country if you're a politician. God help us. But with what we do in our world as business people, family, with church, it is a servant mindset of, how do you do that? And in business, it's providing the tools, removing the obstacles, providing that culture, and also not putting them next to scorpions and acting like everything's okay. It's trying to build that frog pond. And hopefully today's podcast wove that together, and you can see some of the things that we're dealing with that are just mind-boggling. You have a lot of opportunities with energy, and it's an interesting time to be alive. But we'll close out today with Dave Chappelle from back in the day on Conan.
Have you made any promises for the new year?
Yes, and this is a big one. A big one for me. I'm going to change my style of comedy. I have been offensive to too many people, and them days are over. And please don't get mad. Sometimes I hear my act, and I might do a white voice.
Part of your act. Part of your act.
That's right. I'll do a white character.
Right.
It might sound a little like this, but when I do those characters, I am not making fun of the way that white people talk. I am parodying a simple aspect of the white speech pattern. That is the absence of rhythm in it. That's right. Now, it's the same way you might hear a white comedian impersonate a black guy. Now, how's he gonna sound? Say, my man, what's happening? Now, I do not get mad, Conan.
Right.
I can see how to a white guy, a black guy might actually sound like that. Sing songy, musical. Show me what you're working with. Now, and one is not better than the other. As a matter of fact, the white one has a gift in it because white people have a gift where you could say terrible things and it don't sound terrible with that speech pattern.
Really?
I hear it all the time. Job interviews. I'm sorry, Mr. Chappelle, we're just not hiring anyone else. But we'll keep you in mind if something opens up. I'm like, yeah. I said, keep me in mind.
It sounds kind of pleasant.
I've been kicked out of restaurants by white dudes. Now, black dudes kick me out of places that involves guns and fists. White dude kick you out nice as pie. Sir, I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Hey, he said he's afraid to ask me. I believe him. Now, this is just a theory, but maybe, just maybe, that's the reason that most newscasters are white people. Think about it. Okay. If you think of all the bad things a newscaster has to say, I would much rather hear that from a white person than from one of us.
He's got a point.
You've heard it. Today in Kosovo, babies were kicked like footballs. Monsters ate the corn. Famine, murder. We'll have Mike with sports right after this. I'm at the crib like, hey, sports is coming up.
Kicked like footballs, huh? Interesting.
That's right. I mean, a brother scared the hell out of you. This just in. Oh, people's dying all over the streets. You don't want to hear that.
You may have.
Thank you, Earl. That was Earl Watkins, our black field correspondent in Kosovo. with that dramatic retelling of events.
Oh, man.
Man, you gotta love
after he combs his black-ass man.
you gotta love Dave Chappelle. If you weren't watching him on Comedy Central back in the early 2000s, you missed something. You can catch him all on YouTube. But anyway, hope you enjoyed it. Have a good week. We'll be back next week for the Mel Blackwell Experience. Until then, cheers.